Good afternoon, everybody. We'll give it about one more minute. I still see some people are coming into the webinar, so we'll give it about one more minute before we get started. So thank you very much for the patience on that. It's right at 1 o'clock right now. So just kind of bear with us, if you will, while I let people be fashionably late. For all that are on board, thank you very much for joining us today. We're really excited to be with you today. We'll give it just a couple more minutes. Actually, just a couple more seconds anyway. All right, what do you say we get started, guys? You want to?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, so thank you all very, very much for attending. Really appreciate you joining us today and investing your valuable time with us here today. We are looking forward to your active participation, so we ask you to stay engaged, use chat in the application here to log your questions. We'll do our level best to answer them all. My name is Bob Lemke. I'm with Mobile Locker. We are your hosts for today's session. For those of you who don't know anything about Mobile Locker is a platform that drives unprecedented value for our clients through the content engagement platform that we offer. So what we allow our clients to do is optimize their field engagement with their targets, and that can be in any channel. So whether or not you're doing virtual meetings, whether you're doing email engagement, we give you a platform outside of CRM in the platform that you're used to, email, Zoom, whatever it might be, in order to use that platform to share the content. Then what we do is once it's shared, we give you unprecedented capacity to track that content so that we let you know exactly what the receiver of the content is doing with it, how they're engaging with it, when, where they're engaging with it, how much they're engaging with it. And that allows the ultimate sender to have incredible insights. It's almost like being in the room with them as they're going through the content. So our clients range in size from 50 users to some of the largest pharma companies in the world. And we're really excited to be with you. Again, I'm Bob. I'll kind of act as your moderator today. I'm about 25 years in the enterprise software business. And here at Mobile Locker, I'm an equity partner. And I manage sales and marketing here. So we're really excited to have our two panelists with us today. Could not be more privileged, actually, to have with us today George Griffith, who is the co-founder of Connection 360, and Jared Rickard, who is vice president of product with DMD Connect for email. So what I thought I would do real quick is give them an opportunity to just kind of introduce themselves here. And why don't we start with you, George? George, welcome.
Absolutely.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I have been in HCP engagement, I guess, for 29 years now on both the agency side and the pharma side. I started my career right out of college in '92 as a drug rep with SmithKline Beecham, and went to work with Lilly. And then myself and my still current business partners, Didier and Roy, started our own business, really focused on innovative and creative ways to engage healthcare professionals at both the point of convenience, you know, their home, their workplace, wherever they may be, and at the point of care. So it's something I've been doing all my adult life and excited to be here today.
Great. Thank you so much, George. And again, thank you very much for being with us today. So Jared, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yep. As you said, I am Vice President of Product Email for DMD. I've been in the space, the healthcare communication space, specifically HCP targeted, for 18 years this year. I started out with a company called Physicians Interactive and was there for 12 years. And I've been with DMD ever since, always with a focus in email. And a little bit about DMD. At our core, we are a healthcare identity company. And our core asset is our HCP database. It's very unique. It's opt-in and first party. And we've built a suite of products and services around connecting our clients to healthcare providers and providing them deep analytics back on those engagements.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And also to you, Jared, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We are super privileged to have these guys because literally what we want to talk about over the next 45 minutes or so is trends attached to access, attached to engagement in obviously what is a brand new paradigm for all of those out there that whose success depends on sharing insights and engagement with HCPs. These two gentlemen here do this every day. They consult with clients every day on strategies, on trends, what is working, what they can execute. And so we're really excited to have them with us today. So that's what we're going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about. The audience, please don't forget, log your questions on chat. We'll try and answer your questions. I'll keep an eye on as the moderator as we go along. If anything hits you that you want to ask more information about, don't hesitate. And I'll do my very best to see if we can answer the questions as we go. So with that, let's get right into it. So Syneos Health, as I was preparing for this, published an article that talked about this concept of virtual engagement, right? And I thought this slide was worth sharing in the fact that healthcare may be one of the most impacted industries out there. I think everything's been impacted in terms of the adoption and success of product and programs that are launched are so powerfully connected to face-to-face interactions, right? So powerfully connected to access and the ability to engage with the ultimate target and customer. As we enter 2021, all of these companies out there are struggling and challenged to identify a new, exciting range of channels, opportunities to optimize the connection that they have with their ultimate customers. So I think at the end of the day, what we can talk about here is what are companies doing and how are companies, changing the strategy and changing the way they're going about doing things. So to start the discussion, one of the things that we know is, and this is an interesting stat, is that literally less than 3 in 10 HCPs have seen a rep in person in the last year. While most of these HCPs, guys, are engaging in digital content, engaging in different types of channel access to get the information they need. So question to you guys to kind of get the ball rolling is, what are the leading companies that you guys are talking to doing differently? What are the shifts that they've made, the pivots that they've made that you have kind of found to be maybe the most successful or the most impactful? And I don't know who wants to start, but that's a question to both of you.
Yeah, I'll jump in to this one if you don't mind. I think first and foremost, marketers are having to finally utilize all of the marketing channels. And then, and I'll speak to that a little bit more, but on top of that, the really sophisticated ones are taking that word we've all heard, omnichannel, which is, connecting a sequence of marketing touch points together to create, more synergistic outcome. So people are using more tools. Most marketers have, if they've been fortunate enough to rely on their sales force and the power of those face-to-face engagements in the past, now that face-to-face has been minimized and engagement around messaging by the reps is not where it should be, marketers are now having to think about, okay, what kind of virtual peer-to-peer speaker programming do I do? And do I do this and, quote, just make it another tool? Or am I going to say, no, this is mandatory. You need to do these 3 programs a quarter type feel. And that's when I see an adoption with clients, it is those that create a culture of, you're going to need to do these. It's for your own good, but the outcome will be good for you in these virtual programs. And then marketers are obviously exploring email along with the development of thought leader videos, video on demand channels. I've seen marketers looking at EHR and telehealth and how to manage at the point of care. But in short, I guess from my end, I see marketers are opening up their offense beyond the traditional blocking and tackling solutions and really looking at all the channels and media to provide a more innovative engagement approach. And they're doing it. And meaning they're not spinning their wheels talking about it, but they're actually doing it. So
Yeah.
I jump in there, man. Those were kind of thoughts off of the top of my head there.
So execution is key, right? Don't just talk about it. You have to execute, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I would completely agree with you, George. And I think even on that, for years now, we've had conversations about things like next best action, right? That was kind of a buzzword there for a lot of years with marketing. And it was a lot of talk oftentimes, the end product wasn't really next best action. It was some, minimized version of that. And I think what we really saw this year was truly the rise and execution of things like intelligent triggered email, looking at what healthcare providers are looking at on the web, where they're visiting, and then triggering email off of that or triggering other channels off of that, and truly creating more meaningful physician journeys, again, using that omni-channel. In terms of, the sales force that has, had that time minimized, that face time minimized, we have seen a lot of organizations reach out to us, for example, to look for better email addresses for which to contact the healthcare provider. And we've also seen that a lot of companies are looking at, when are the healthcare providers active? Looking for data around when are the healthcare providers active in digital channels, because that's their point of access at this point.
Yes.
Yeah. So could you make the argument that the rep to HCP dynamic, that relationship, is forever altered and is kind of forever changed in terms of how the rep goes about delivering value to these HCPs?
I would definitely, I think it will be changed forever. I mean, even let's assume that things were to trend back towards, the way things were before. I just don't see the fact that offices, doctors' offices, hospitals are going to be as open to having people that are not essential to their business there, sitting in a waiting room. That's kind of been the traditional, whether it was sitting in the waiting room. George, you and I talked earlier this week, meeting the doctor in the parking lot, to get a couple minutes of their time. I don't think that's going to be acceptable anytime in the near future. So I feel like fundamentally the pathway and the channel has changed to be much more focused on digital.
Yeah, I think about the rep of tomorrow. The adoption and the skill sets that we're looking for if we were going to hire a sales force are going to be different. And again, we can build upon what makes, the sales reps great. I remember myself back in the day, it was that persistency, that waiting in a waiting room. But you're really going to have to be a product of adapting. You're going to have to be good online. You're going to have to know how to use the assets that, rep triggered emails, or how do I get video to my customers, or all of these things that hopefully the brand teams will provide you. You can't be the rep that goes, well, I've got relationships. Relationships sell, I can wait and meet them somewhere. I think that's done in so many ways. I mean, there's a little bit of it that'll exist. Mm-hmm. The rep of tomorrow is going to have to be armed with those skill sets, plus the whole digital ability to engage also.
Yeah. Totally agree. And obviously all of the data is pointing to that. Hey, really quick, George, we have a question. I want to point this out to you. Somebody asked if you could just expand a tiny bit on the definition of omnichannel.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate the question being asked, because I didn't realize I was in that channel myself until I started hearing everyone use that as a new buzzword.
Yeah.
So it's a great question, I'll say. So it's multi-channel first, but it's really looking at how to take, or at least this is how I think about it, how to take your segmentation data and how to, those understandings about a client. So let's say you've got a fence sitter and these are their behavioral characteristics. And then you've got one that could be called a data geek and these are their behavioral characteristics. Well, how do we use these multiple channels, but how do we personalize and customize these touch points and maybe even link them together in a series of events. So if I go here, I'm being spoken to as my segment, and then I might experience another touch point as well. So, you know, that's easy to talk about and do. What it all comes down to at the end of the day is how much budget do you have? You know, that's where I start every conversation with every client. But no matter what it is, it's like any of us in life. Okay, what are we going to do with this amount of money? You just need to be more thoughtful about, okay, how can I spend that? Can I do an email campaign? Can I do this? Can I link these things together? And at least try to apply some of those principles to that, no matter what size budget you have.
Great. So I hope that does answer the question. Great job doing that very comprehensively, by the way. So shifting gears a tiny bit here. You probably see this up on the slide. So pharma giant Viva has actually suggested, and I was kind of blown away by this, suggested that virtual meetings are actually resulting in significantly more time with individual HCPs. So the statistic that they've actually published is that the average meeting FaceTime, or the average time in a virtual setting versus in person, actually increases from 3 minutes to almost 19 minutes in this virtual setting. I was kind of blown away by this. And the question I have for you guys about this is, clearly, gone are the days where let's bring in lunch, let's have a, 2-3 minutes to say hello, to clearly needing to have much more relevant, much more engaging content in that session. So what are you guys seeing as that shift? What kind of pressure does that put on the pharma companies to alter the way they go about not only preparing people for these meetings, but delivering?
Sure. I'll start that one off, and I know you have some good thoughts on this as well, George. But I think one of the key things here is you mentioned bringing in lunch, right? And that's all about kind of a sense of understanding and knowledge of your target. You know that their favorite restaurant is across town. It's Italian food. You always bring that in. That gets you your access. I think what this fundamentally changes is that the rep then has to basically have that same level of understanding and knowledge about digital channel that the doctor is most interested in, right? So they like to receive their content via video. They're the type of person who likes to read. They really like white papers, and that's where they get most of their content. So once they have that understanding, you need to have the content. And I think that's really becomes such a fundamental thing, is that no longer can you rely on one channel for a certain type of content. You're going to have all your content in multiple channels, and being able to bring somebody like, a key opinion leader in video and also in a white paper piece, and, possibly a profile of them on the web with information, that becomes a important part of the mix for the marketer.
Yeah. I mean, our theme, as we're kind of naturally unfolding here for the listeners, is this multi-channel, omni-channel approach here. And I think from my 2 cents, I would add to that is, again, we need to arm our reps better, arm and train. I'll say those in tandem. They need to have the ability to share rich media videos. So if you're not making thought leader videos, that's something, find someone to partner with to do that. Find an avenue to share those. Rep triggered emails. Again, it used to be, well, that's the marketer's job. Let them do that. I'm going to go face to face. We need these individuals to have their access. What makes them great? We need to give them the tools. And to that end, I will say, I think the traditional interactive visual aid has got to change. Viz aids have always been a challenge to get reps to use with their customers. During COVID, it's hit, probably a new low. So there's got to be a more creative way when a rep is engaging via Zoom or Teams, that they can make impact with the customer, versus, how are things going in these unprecedented times, not making light of COVID. But I think we've moved beyond that, and we're going to watch our market share drop as marketers if we don't start arming our reps to have better questions to ask, to better engage virtually. Mm-hmm. And then go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, where there's an interesting dialogue going on in the chat that kind of touches on that a little bit, George, right? And what they're basically saying is that one of the big advantages of this idea of this virtual engagement is that more you get access potentially to more people at the same time, right? So
it's interesting because we do a lot. We do a lot of virtual, and you've kind of got different cars for different virtual programs. I'll use the analogy of a 3, 5, and 7 series thing. So these 3 series cars are these more one-on-one, personalized, customer-centric web programs where that's your entryway. And then there's these more middle ground where there's maybe 20 to 25, and then you have your larger scale national broadcast. So the participant here is right on track. But it's funny, sometimes our bigger webinars, unless it's a new drug, have become less attended during these times. But the more one-on-one, customer-centric, personalized approach where I can actually come to you and say, hey, Dr. Bob, how about we do an exclusive program just for your practice? It's one-on-one. You pick the date, the time, the topic. We'll schedule it in 5 days. That's become something that helps a rep get entryway, that
Awesome.
type of program.
Yeah. So in essence, what we're doing is, I don't know if I want to call it it's a virtual lunch. Maybe it's a virtual lunch and learn. Maybe it's something along those lines, right? Where you're getting the entire team or the entire practice access, but it's just in a subtly different way, right?
Yeah, but it's doing that too. Again, you're not incorrect by any means. I want it at breakfast, George. I don't do the lunch. I'm busy.
Yeah.
I want it at 7 at night, and I want it. Yeah, and I want it on my time. And also, I don't want to be competing over every other practice for Q&A. I want to feel special. I want something just for me. And if I want to invite, 2 or 3 of my staff, then it's just for us at a time that works for us. So that is a big trend line that we see.
Love that. Totally agree with you. And again, so we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but this whole concept of doing it on their time, right? I think we see a lot of data that's showing there's a lot of that going on. Jared, did you have anything else to say before we shift topics?
Well, I was just going to say, I think, we always have to look at what is a potential weakness can also be a potential strength, right? And so, we're getting less FaceTime, but we're getting maybe more virtual time. Something like the visual aid, I think, can be very much animated. Kind of think about the old days of e-detailing and things like that, where I think, the requirement now is going to be to create a digital version of that visual aid that's much more engaging. Maybe it's an explainer video with the Viz aid, something like that. But I think there's a lot of opportunity there to optimize that channel further with regards to still having a visual aid.
Yes, it is. That has become my new thing. and not just for whomever does this. Someone needs to help out, and people whoever gets in that role as a marketer, it's so tempting to say, well, I don't want to rock the boat. I want to do, what's worked in the past. But this is begging for a disruption in this space. Big time.
Yeah. Great discussion on there. And again, I think we could probably do a whole session on that, right? Because of that creates, like I said at the very beginning, I was kind of blown away by this concept of 3 minutes to 19 minutes per shot, right? So chances are your at bats are probably going to be fewer, right? Yeah. But the compelling nature of what you're sharing, the fact that you've got that captive attention, is really, I think, creating a completely different thought process around the content creators and it probably gets a lot more people involved in the discussion as you prepare and enable whoever it is that's executing that meeting, right?
Yeah. You're doing something special for a practice. You might not have, I might not be able to drop by, 8 times a quarter, but if I can do one program of impact that's personalized and it's just for you, and then I've got a rep triggered email that I follow up with, and then I send you a video of that speaker following that, I can take my one call in person and now sequence that out with a series of these other, again, we'll use our new word for the day, omni-channel touch points. That's really the way we need to help people be successful as reps.
Yeah. And so kind of a little commercial for Mobile Locker and the kind of this idea of having platforms that allow you to pivot, from one way to another, from one channel to another, that are seamless and frictionless. So great discussion there. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about email, right? So done a ton of research on this idea. Jared, you live, breathe, and eat this.
Mm-hmm.
So data is suggesting, and it's pretty compelling, that there is a massive increase in not only the use of email for engagement, but the acceptance, right? So the acceptance from the HCP of email as a place and a channel that they go to for information, right? So 300% increase in open rates, literally in a year, right? Yep. Read time, engagement with that content is way up, off the charts up. So where does kind of the concept of email just fit in, Jared? And probably run this to you, Jared. I'm sure, George, you'll have some insight on this as well. But given the fact that, you guys do email for a living, what are your thoughts on where companies should be thinking about taking their email programs?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, the data you're pulling from there is straight from us. And what we saw last year with email literally was, when we watched it from the start of the pandemic, we were watching it, and it just climbed and climbed and climbed, and especially personal email. So your Gmails and your Yahoos, doctors really, especially during the peak part of the pandemic from like, say, end of March through, maybe end of June, they really moved to their personal email. We watched the time of day and day of week that healthcare providers were engaging with content via email shift to later and later in the day and even in the evening. And, that definitely shows what I think we always say, which is email is the original one-to-one channel, right? So, it's the great thing about email is it's on their terms. And with so much volatility right now, you want something that's on your terms. You want something you can come to when you're ready to engage with it. And so we saw that acceptance really go up during this time. And the funny thing is, it peaked then and it's come down a little as people have gone back to maybe a little bit more modified version of, sort of a normal business day. But what we do still continue to see is that when healthcare providers are at work, they're very busy engaging with patients. They're not as much engaging with their digital channels, but as soon as they're off of work or before work, they're very engaged with those digital channels, especially email. And so, yeah, that's really been the trend we've seen. So
a couple questions come to mind. There's a couple questions from the audience here that I'm going to kind of weave into my question, if I may. So two things. It feels like there's and maybe I'm reading into this, but it does feel like that there is a openness from the HCPs to do this on their personal time, right? To do this type of engagement, this type of research, this type of education on their personal time. So two questions on that. Number one, Sherry on the meeting asked how many if you have this insight, Jared, how many average emails a day from like reps do these HCPs get? I don't know if you have that information, but the second piece is, what about personal time emails? What about having personal emails, maybe text? How are they feeling about that, which is obviously a little bit of a crossover into that personal time, right?
Sure. As far as emails they get every day, we mostly work with brand teams and marketers. So it would be hard for me to say how many they're getting a day from reps. It really cuts differently based on specialty. So your general practitioners probably get about 2 times the amount of email that a specialist gets in a given day. From the marketing side of things, we're still talking about, likely from all sources, 5, 6, 7 maybe is most, in a given day. And then the rep emails would be probably above and beyond that, but I don't imagine most reps are emailing every single day. I think that would get them in some trouble. So, but the email channels, very well accepted. So, even with that volume, we do still see great engagement even across multiple brands, with one healthcare provider. So they're definitely accepting of the email. In terms of the personal email, again, sometimes we hear a little bit of resistance to the idea of a rep using a personal email where maybe they didn't have one. But we do see that doctors are very willing to accept email at personal email because, again, they aren't always checking their work email at night. I think there's become one of the shifts I think we've seen, right, is work hours are work hours, and they're very focused there. And then their personal hours, they don't have as much going on. You know, there's just not as many activities going on after work anymore, right? Your kids don't have soccer practice. You don't maybe have your hobby or your club. There's not the gatherings. And so they're willing to engage with that personal email off hours.
Great. George, anything to add there?
I would add the creativity of how a marketer uses email. A marketer and a rep uses email is important. So for instance, we've got email. What are we doing with it? So for instance, let's say we've had that virtual event. Do I now have a summary of that content that I as a rep can send out, or as another third party can send out as a follow-up to that event? Do I use email as a driver to perhaps a video channel where they can see, if you enjoyed attending this speaker program with this physician, I use that email as a driver to have you watch other videos on demand as well. So it's taking all the intelligence of what Jared just said, and really I'm just sliding it through to, okay, now how do we operationalize it and put it out there into our offense? So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, which touches a little bit on Sherry's question, which she talked about, kind of clarified her question around not so much how many emails does a doc get every day, but how, more importantly, how do you cut through all of that sea of noise? And again, George, to your point, it's the creativity. It's probably put some onus on the content creators, right? To help you with that.
It goes back to that Omnichannel, that our word of the day, where if I'm personalizing that with some insight and knowledge on the segment that you fall into, Bob, and I know a little bit about your personality and who you are, and I can create subject lines, I can create content, I can create a more customer-centric experience. That's how, instead of the mass cattle call, come one, come all, now you're doing that. And I'll add in one other nugget. Using ICD-10, CPT, NDC codes, all of those behavior-based data that we as marketers have access to purchase, using that as a trigger point for your email, to then launch into delivering the right message at the right time based upon a behavior that someone has taken. I mean, that's really taking it to the next level, but again, that's what we need to be thinking about.
Yeah. And that digital engagement behavior, like DMD, we work in that space a lot. What they've been reading on the web, what they've been researching, and then hitting them with an email that is relevant to what they looked at yesterday somewhere on the web is crucial. On the subject line side of things, in order to get the best delivery, because you got to get to the inbox first, right? You don't want to get filtered out. You got to have very short, crisp subject lines. 35 characters roughly is what'll get you delivered. So you're really playing with your pre-header most, and trying to put that personalization, as you called out, George. The more personalized you can be and get that into the pre-header, that's what's going to help you cut through, that digital noise.
Yeah. And Jared, does some of that come back to that relationship stuff, right? So if you, as the rep, know some things about this HCP target, which you should, right? Mm-hmm. Just because you don't have that day-to-day access to the office doesn't necessarily, I think, relieve you from the onus to understand that practice, understand that HCP, understand what drives them and what makes them, the type of business implications that they're faced with and things like that. So I think that's where some of that relationship stuff and some of the research and all that can live in that subject line, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. If you know that they are, very competitive, you might want to pose questions, within your pre-header, right? Like that kind of thing. You kind of think about the emotional component that you want to hit, knowing their personality. Yep.
So, George, question for you came in from Adam. Point of care. How does and we're back into Omnichannel.
Yeah.
How does point of care fit into the Omnichannel discussion that you were having?
So point of care for us recently, and I've been getting a great education over probably the last 12 months around EHR and telehealth. We've really moved hot and heavy into that space, and it's been great. So we talk to clients about point of convenience, email, video on demand, and now point of care, being able to, right when someone is in their EHR or telehealth workflow, being able to message them. And based upon a behavior that they took, again, you can put these data filters in place. So whether somebody's diagnosing, they run a lab test, they come in with this pre-existing condition, all of these things that you want to go, man, this is my patient type. Now I want to serve them up our guidelines or the results of our clinical trial. That's a really sophisticated way to complement, again, a more multi-channel, omni-channel approach. But I've really gotten into this point of care messaging.
Great discussion here. So the one thing that somebody did ask, I think Mark actually answered the question around spam filters. Jared, you probably have a ton of insight around that. Web, filters, et cetera. I think there are definitely ways to, be effective in that environment.
Yeah, and we could do a whole webinar and have done whole webinars on that, which you could, if you visit DMD's website, we have links to all of our past webinars. We just did one on filters. So, I could spend time there, but yeah, you definitely want to be testing your email in order to ensure that it's going to get through.
Awesome. Hey, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit into a subject that we touched on earlier. And that is this idea of how this virtual engagement is allowing, again, tons of data on this. As you see up here on the screen, this was a survey, very large survey taken across the US with HCPs, talking about how they prefer to have access to this type of information, right? How they prefer to be sold to, how they prefer to be communicated with. And as you see here, clearly digital is coming up to the top. But we're seeing one of the things that we're seeing as a result of the pandemic is HCPs are, in fact, I think, taking more control over the way they want to be communicated with, right? So what is your guys' experience around what HCPs want? How do HCPs now want to be communicated with? And I know Omnichannel, George, we've touched on that. But what can pharma companies do to kind of be reactive and be responsive to what the HCPs are asking for?
I'll jump in here on that. So I think first and foremost, if you look at the heart and soul of our offense in pharma, we are delivering messages. We've got stories to tell, and we need to think first and foremost. We'll start at the speaker program, which is now the virtual speaker program. If you've still got a deck that's 45 to 50 minutes in length, I hear you, but it's time to start thinking about modularizing that deck. And your first thing is going to be, oh, there's no way my med legal. Yes, they will, as long as they're fair balanced. Every deck can split itself into, you've got your disease state, you got your efficacy and safety, you got your dosing, your MOA, and maybe a case study. That's everyone's deck out there for the most part. So you need to start thinking about more personalized, smaller modules that we can communicate with, and allowing the choice of a physician to choose their own adventure. What approved module topic is of interest to me? Whom may I want to hear that presentation from? What time may I want to hear that from? So I think we need to be more thoughtful from the virtual end of things. And again, on the non-personal end of things, if our budgets allow us, again, figuring out who these folks like to be communicated to, creating rich media videos, creating places where non-personally doctors can go and visit content, where reps can drive doctors, again, using email or other things to drive them there, engaging them at the point of care. So it's really creating a much more personalized experience. And that's hard because it's easy to say in a talk like this, but then we, as a marketer, we get in the room and we go, I don't have money to buy custom stuff.
Right.
But you need to figure out some way, to have a dialogue with your agency partners and go, I need to start doing this. What can I do with this amount of money? And then it's like building a wardrobe. Instead of buying 20 cheap suits, what is it that I can do with this amount of money to be more impactful? So Jared, I'd ask you to jump in on that.
Yeah, I think, one of the things we talk about a lot is again, repurposing all your content into all channels, right? Again, because we know that the healthcare provider is going to want to have the ability to customize their experience, right? So you can't just have one thing in one channel. So that's very important. I think the other thing that we think about is, man, the adoption of some of these newer technologies just have to happen this year we do a lot of we've been pushing a lot of in-email video, for example, for the last several years, but we've had a very slow adoption rate. And then all of a sudden this year, that's really picking up. And I'd seen in the Slack or the chat here that somebody had mentioned the ISI. We do video and email with the scrolling box of ISI below it. There's a whole bunch of new solutions that can be utilized in this space. I think one of the other things too is, having some sort of digital preference center for your doctors to visit where they can literally raise their hand and self-identify what kind of content they're interested in. We always talk about surveying docs. You survey them, get a feel, get a pulse for what they like. And then reading back again, that digital engagement behavior from, what they're doing on the web, what kind of content are they engaging? You might be able to get enough insight to know up front.
Awesome. So the other thing that we hear from our clients here at Mobile Locker is this idea of getting the understanding of what clients are in fact doing with the content, right? Knowing that. So having marketing get visibility into the level of engagement, the level of interaction with specific pieces of content, which allows them to make better decisions, better decisions around the type of channel. Is it video? Is it email? Is it an ISV? Is it, different types of insights that they can get around how the HCPs are engaging with the content is hugely, hugely valuable to them.
Agreed.
So, and George, I was just messing around with you there on the chat.
Can we answer Candace Lankowski's question?
Yeah. So let's see. Go back up to Candace's. Oh yeah. So Candace asked the question: as commercial models are changing based on new ways to interact with customers, what key themes do you see in future commercial model of companies that are leading?
So I asked to answer her question, but I almost want to go, geez, Candace, what a great question. And where do we start to break that down? We first, if I was, on a whiteboard, I write sales reps. All right, what are we going to do with our sales reps? What does that look like? What does our marketers look like as far as who we're hiring there as well? But I think I'll start with the sales force. I think it is a very thoughtful approach that we need to consider with the sales rep of tomorrow. I know we hit on that earlier, but they are going to have skill sets that the reps of yesterday might not have. And again, I'm a rep of yesterday that has learned to adopt and adapt to the current world. But, I talk to a lot of reps and it's, I don't get the whole Zoom thing and I don't do that. Well, we're going to have to arm and train them and pick out folks that are going to be able to fit that. And then as far as marketers go, man, there's a whole lot more sophistication with respect to all of these media channels than used to be required from back in the day. We really have to understand, because now we're working with media partners. We have to make sure that of course we trust them, but we want to be adept at what they're telling us and use our own brains to that. So that's a great discussion, Candace and others to really have. But yes, we have to rethink that whole model, and we need to do it sooner versus later. You remember in the beginning of the pandemic when we said, geez, well, I think we'll be able to go on that vacation in the next 4 months. We'll be good then. And it keeps pushing out. So we might as well rethink tomorrow, today, and get ahead of it.
Totally agree. And obviously that's kind of what we're talking about here. And again, we could probably do this. We could almost literally these are such good questions. We could probably take a lot of these questions and do a whole session.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, no, totally agree. So the one question that also came up, and I don't know if you guys have an answer off the top of your head around, do you have any mechanism? Do you think these companies have any mechanism for measuring? I don't know if the question is there an algorithm or measuring the return on these engagements, or is that kind of it's a big question, I think. It's a good question, but it's a big question.
It is a good question, and it is a big question and a good question. Depends. I mean, part of the reason I think we love certain digital channels so much, like, again, I would say email, to an extent social, is they are pretty measurable channels, right? You can at least measure the engagement very effectively. So like with email, you can measure your opens, your click-throughs. Then you can measure the website activity after the fact. You can even measure how much time somebody spent in the email, like how many, seconds were they in that email. So that's very measurable. In terms of getting the other side of it, though, the ROI, almost always you're going to have to bring in a partner to tie all the script data together with, those engagements. And it can be a very worthwhile action. I think the important thing, though, right now is just to get as much going in those digital channels no matter what, because we know the ROI right now on face-to-face meetings is not as high as it used to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think my 2 cents on monitoring engagement is to get a plan at the beginning. Everybody starts off at the beginning of a campaign and it's, we're going to measure this. We're going to bring in our analytics team. They'll make for a good third party. And it never happens. I mean, I watch it every single time for 20 years. Well, we're all booked up at blank company with our analytics folks. So it's figuring out how to monitor it. What are the metrics? Aligning on that with whomever you choose to make sure you know your outcome. I mean, sit down and go, okay, what is this? What are the definitions of your metrics? Because everybody uses some different. So get what is called a data exchange agreement in place. And what are your definitions for an email open? Oh, we call that an exposure. Great. Okay, then that means this. Great. What is a video engagement? Oh, that's an interaction. So aligning on those and then figuring out where and how, if you can pull script data through, who to do it with. So there's always a way to measure. We just have to begin with the end in mind.
So kind of the observation that I have in hearing and listening to you guys talk is I wonder, is there an opportunity for the nimble, very agile companies out there to lead in this, right? To do things fast, to execute, to try things. Because as you very well know, I mean, unfortunately, I assume we have some very large farmers out here. They aren't necessarily known for velocity and speed of doing things, right? Big ships don't move that fast, right? They can't turn as fast as a smaller company can. So again, I think you said it, Jared, do something, right? Get started, right?
Yep. Yeah, so, I think if we're not, anybody who's not agile right now and can't pivot, you mentioned earlier, Mark, ability to pivot channels, as I know that's one of the things that you guys are big on within Mobile Locker. If you can't pivot quickly, you're going to get lost.
Yeah, totally agree. So we're kind of coming up on time. So I want to kind of begin the process of closing things out a little bit. So one of the key themes that we've talked about is access and engagement, right? And it continues to be a challenge. So what I'd like the two of you to do and I know that there's no silver bullet. I know there's nothing that's going to work every single time that you can execute tomorrow. But if you guys could just kind of give us a little bit on what companies can do today, tomorrow, what they can do to start moving the needle, right? To begin the process of, if they are seeing these engagement and access challenges, what are the types of things that they can execute very quickly in order to move the needle? Can you guys maybe just touch on that a little bit?
Sure. I'll jump in on that one. So the first thing is you have to start. Everything takes 4 months to build. If you've worked in pharma, that's, it takes a while to build. So know that. So once you've come to the place that, hey, you know what, we do need something by summer, then you need to start today. So make a decision to start. Then it's okay, well, what is it that we need? If I were on a brand team, I go, okay, I need to do something for my reps. I need to make sure they're effective. So what tool do I have for them to do that with? Is it a program type that they can enthusiastically offer, as a differentiator? Is it an engagement via email to, again, rich media videos? What am I giving them differently? And if you're saying to yourself, well, they've got their Viva Media Library with their Viz8 on it, and that's all you've done, that's probably not helping them move the needle. So that's the first thing. I would really figure out something to do with my reps. And I talk to my reps too, because I see a lot of people invest in things without asking their sales force. So get them involved and make sure they want to buy it. Then I would figure out, okay, what kind of speaker program am I going to do? Do I have virtual? What can I do? You can do a lot of different things with big and small budgets very creatively. So I would explore some sort of offense in virtual. And then we need to do something non-personally, something at night where as a marketer, when I lay my head on the pillow and I go, well, if my reps didn't do anything today and no virtual programs were had, do I at least know that I was getting some sort of guaranteed engagements and physician level data with my targets? So I'd want to have some sort of offense to do that. So that would be my thing, Jared, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, start tomorrow, and I agree with that, or start today, however you want to look at it. Everything takes a while. But I think a couple quick wins I can think of off the top of my head. And we talked a lot about, establishing a relationship, a digital relationship with the doctors and enabling your reps to have the same level of understanding that they had the face-to-face in the digital world. So there's a lot of data partners out there that you can work with. So I would find good data partners right away who can give you the kind of analytics or data that's going to feed that knowledge, something about what they're interested in. Again, you mentioned script data, George, all those other things, but there's so much beyond that as well. So I would start looking for those right data partners. I think the other one is, again, figuring out you're not going to be able to do all of this yourself. So I would start to look for the right people who can help you, people who are experts. Because if you try and learn how to do all these things, it's going to take you, 3, 4, 5 times as long to do it. And finally, I think, again, we just have to already start to think about the rep of tomorrow is probably going to look a little bit more like a digital marketer. The digital marketer of tomorrow probably needs to understand analytics a little bit better. And so there's, start those processes of changing those behaviors. What do they need to learn? Kind of put a plan in place for me as a digital marketer. I need to become more analytical. Where can I go, to get that? Where can I go to get my reps trained in digital marketing?
Can I add one comment, Bob?
Absolutely. That's why you're here.
I'd written this down earlier, and it's digital will not drive reps to extinction, but marketers that do not arm and train their reps on how to utilize digital, and then reps that do not utilize the digital solutions that have been provided, that's where the extinction will come. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a simple statement, and it's really kind of tying up what Jared said, but it's not, oh, now it's digital. Because I've got so many customers, we love to have that conversation. Oh, so you think I can cut reps from my budget? They're usually smaller companies. No way. It'll never happen. It's been a discussion that's been had since the 80s and 70s and for that, I'm sure. But if we as marketers don't give the reps the tools and then train them, we can't leave that piece out. So much of the time I see my customers, they'll spend all of this money, they'll roll something out, and it's just never, or not even roll it out. It's, hey, here's a tool, find it in Viva, use it accordingly, and then it's never done anything with.
Totally agree with that. And the other thing that we hear from our customers as well is those tools. I mean, I totally agree with you that they have to invest. Both the marketers, the salespeople have to invest in that enablement process. But disruption is about removing friction, right? So the reality is we need to arm them with tools that are easy, that are adaptable, swiftly deployed, right? No complexity. So things that when we hear from our customers that they're interested in speed, velocity, that we want this in the rep's hands next week, those are opportunities that we love because we recognize that those companies get it, right? Those companies get the need for velocity and the need for lack of complexity, right? Which is kind of part and parcel to what you talked about, George.
Yes.
So unfortunately, we're about out of time. I made a personal commitment to get us out of here in well under an hour. So with that, I wanted to certainly thank, first of all, the participants here. Thanks to everybody for your investment of the time. Really, really appreciate it. We will do this again. So please stay tuned. Keep an eye out there because we will absolutely do this again. Thank you again to the audience for participating. A heartfelt, very sincere thanks to George and Jared. Been my distinct privilege and pleasure getting to know you guys as we prepared and put this together. Could not be more appreciative of the time. And maybe we can do this again, guys. Maybe we can do part 2 if you guys would be open to it.
Absolutely.
So I
Absolutely.
put up the contact information for everybody. So please log that if you're a participant. Please feel free to continue the dialogue. Again, every single one of us has a really high value way to go about this process of engagement and access, right? So George with the programs and the very well thought out strategies, and Jared with this idea of email engagement and DMD data and all of those types of things, and Mobile Locker in terms of tracking and the ability to comfortably use the platforms that you're using today outside of the CRM to engage and track. So we all have really cool value, I think, that is being delivered on an ongoing basis. So I will close simply by saying that you will receive a recording. So as a registrant to the webinar, you will also receive a recording. So you'll have an on-demand access to the content that we shared today. So that should arrive in your inbox in the fairly short term, probably within an hour or so. So with that, again, I thank you guys, George, Jared. I don't know if you guys want to say a quick goodbye, and we'll wrap it up.
Thank you, everybody. It's been
thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Thanks. I hope everyone has a great day.
You
Take
too.
care.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.